In early February 2026, 4 humans will climb aboard the most powerful rocket ever flown. They'll leave Earth faster than any crewed spacecraft in history. They'll travel farther from home than humans have in more than half a century. And then, they won't land on the moon. That's the part most people get wrong. Artemis II is not a lunar landing mission. There's no touchdown, no flag, no footprints in the dust. So why send astronauts 230,000 miles into deep space just to fly past the moon? Let's find out. To understand Artemis II, you have to zoom out. NASA's Artemis program is a step-by-step return to deep space human exploration, something humanity hasn't attempted since the Apollo era. It started with Artemis I in 2022. That mission sent an uncrewed Orion spacecraft around the moon for about 25 days, covering roughly 1.4 million miles. The goal was simple: prove the hardware could survive the trip to lunar distance and back. Artemis II, scheduled for 2026, is where everything changes. For the first time, humans will ride Orion beyond low Earth orbit. This mission exists for one reason: put people inside Orion and make sure everything works exactly the way it's supposed to. If Artemis II succeeds, NASA moves on to Artemis III, the mission intended to return astronauts to the lunar surface. But the moon is not the final destination. NASA's long-term strategy is to build a sustained human presence on the moon, learning how to live, work, and operate far from Earth for weeks at a time. Those lessons are critical because every problem we solve near the moon is one we don't have to solve for the first time on Mars. In other words, Artemis II is the gateway mission. If Artemis II is the test that decides NASA's future beyond Earth, then the Space Launch System, or SLS, is the blunt instrument making it possible. SLS is the most powerful rocket NASA has ever flown, more powerful than the Space Shuttle, more powerful than anything currently operational. Its design looks familiar, and that's not an accident. On either side are 2 massive solid rocket boosters, similar in concept to the shuttles, but significantly upgraded. Between them sits the core stage, powered by 4 RS-25 engines, the same engine family that once flew on the Space Shuttle, now pushed to their absolute limits. When SLS lifts off, it produces nearly 4 million kilograms of thrust. That's about 450 metric tons more thrust than Saturn V, the rocket that took Apollo astronauts to the moon in the 1960s and 70s. And for Artemis II, those boosters carry a unique detail you won't see again. Painted near the top of each booster is a massive America 250 logo, marking the 250th anniversary of the United States in 2026. It's a symbolic touch. Engineers from every US state helped build this rocket, and Artemis II is meant to showcase that national effort on a global stage. SLS's job is simple but unforgiving: get Orion and its crew off Earth safely and send them on a precise path toward the moon. Once that's done, SLS is finished. Everything else depends on Orion. Orion is the real star of Artemis II. At first glance, it looks a lot like the Apollo command module, but under the surface, it's a completely different machine. Orion is made up of 3 main sections. At the bottom is the European Service Module, built by ESA. This is Orion's engine room. It provides power, propulsion, water, oxygen, and thermal control. Without it, Orion doesn't move and the crew doesn't survive. Above that is the Crew Module, the pressurized capsule where the astronauts live and work for the entire mission. It has about 330 cubic feet of internal volume, roughly 60% more room than Apollo ever had. It's still cramped. Think delivery van, not space station, but it's a huge upgrade over 1960s spacecraft. Protecting that crew is a heat shield made of roughly 1,300 AVE-coat tiles, designed to slowly burn away during re-entry and carry heat with it. This heat shield is one of the most critical systems being validated before future landing missions. And on top of everything sits the launch abort system. If something goes catastrophically wrong during ascent, this tower can pull the crew module away from the rocket in milliseconds, potentially saving all 4 lives. For Artemis II, the astronauts have given their spacecraft a name. They call it Integrity, and by the end of this mission, that name will be tested harder than at any point since Apollo. Artemis II isn't just a hardware test, it's a human one. NASA selected 4 astronauts, each chosen for a very specific reason. Reed Wiseman serves as the mission commander. He's a US Navy test pilot, an engineer, and a veteran astronaut who has already logged over 160 days in space. His job is simple to describe and brutal to execute. Keep the crew, the spacecraft, and the mission aligned when things don't go as planned. Victor Glover is the pilot. He's flown more than 40 different aircraft, served in combat missions, and already completed a long-duration stay aboard the International Space Station. On Artemis II, he'll handle critical manual flight tests, including precision proximity operations far from Earth. The mission specialists bring depth and resilience. Christina Koch is an electrical engineer and holds the record for the longest single spaceflight by a woman, spending nearly a full year in orbit. She brings experience in long-duration missions, system troubleshooting, and human endurance. And then there's Jeremy Hansen. Hansen is a Canadian Space Agency astronaut, and Artemis II will make him the first Canadian ever to travel to the moon. He's a physicist, a military pilot, and notably, this will be his first spaceflight. There are very few people in history whose first trip to space was a journey around the moon. Together, this crew represents exactly what Artemis II demands: test pilots, engineers, long-duration veterans, and leadership under pressure. Launch day for Artemis II starts long before the rocket ever moves. The crew wakes up about 8 hours before liftoff. Medical checks come first, then breakfast, then one last look at the weather and the vehicle status. After that, the astronauts suit up, say goodbye to their families, and ride out to Launch Pad 39B at the Kennedy Space Center, the same historic pad that sent Apollo astronauts and space shuttle crews into space. Once at the pad, they take an elevator about 84 meters up the launch tower, step across the crew access arm, and climb inside Orion. From this moment on, everything runs on a precise countdown. At T-0, things happen fast. First, the 4 RS-25 engines at the base of the core stage ignite. They roar to life while the rocket is still held down, allowing computers to confirm all 4 engines are producing full thrust. A few seconds later, the 2 solid rocket boosters ignite. At that point, there is no turning back. The boosters alone generate the majority of the rocket's thrust, and the entire stack begins climbing off the pad. Within seconds, SLS clears the tower and starts pitching downrange, accelerating sideways to build orbital speed rather than going straight up. About 2 minutes into flight, the solid rocket boosters burn out and separate, falling back into the Atlantic Ocean. Roughly 8 minutes after liftoff, the core stage shuts down. It has done its job. The Interim Cryogenic Propulsion Stage, or ICPS, ignites next, providing the final push to place Orion into Earth orbit. For the first time since Apollo, humans are now orbiting Earth in a spacecraft designed to take them to the moon. Reaching orbit isn't the goal. It's the beginning of the real test. Once in space, the crew begins a detailed systems checkout: power, propulsion, navigation, communications, and life support. If something doesn't behave exactly as expected, this is where the mission could stop. Assuming all systems check out, Orion fires its engine again to enter a highly elliptical Earth orbit. At its highest point, Orion will reach an apogee of about 70,000 kilometers from Earth, roughly 150 times farther than the International Space Station and farther than humans have traveled in decades. From that distance, Earth no longer fills the window. It shrinks to something closer to the size of a basketball held at arm's length. Then comes one of the most important demonstrations of the entire mission. After separating from the ICPS, Orion turns back toward it. From about 100 meters away, Victor Glover takes manual control of the spacecraft. This is the proximity operations test. Using Orion's thrusters, he flies the capsule to within about 9 meters of the discarded upper stage, extremely close by spaceflight standards. This is not just a stunt. In future missions, Orion will need to dock with lunar landers and space stations. NASA needs to know that. The spacecraft responds precisely to human inputs, the thrusters perform reliably, and the crew can take control if automation fails. This is human-in-the-loop spaceflight, far from Earth, with no safety net. Only after these tests are complete does Orion move on to the next phase of the mission, the burn that sends 4 humans toward the moon. Once the Earth orbit tests are complete, Artemis II reaches the moment everything has been building toward. Orion fires its engine for translunar injection, the burn that commits the spacecraft to the moon. From here, there is no quick way home. The journey takes about 4 days, with Orion following a carefully calculated free return trajectory. This path uses gravity alone to bring the spacecraft back to Earth if something goes wrong. No extra engine burns required. It's the same basic principle that famously saved the crew of Apollo 13. As Orion approaches the moon, the astronauts aren't preparing to land. Instead, they're lining up for a high-speed flyby of the lunar far side. At closest approach, Orion passes roughly 4,600 miles above the moon's surface, close enough to see craters, mountain ranges, and terrain in extraordinary detail, but far enough to remain on a safe return path. Then comes one of the most surreal moments of the mission. As Orion passes behind the moon, all communication with Earth stops. For about 45 minutes, there's no radio contact, no telemetry, no updates, just 4 humans, sealed inside a spacecraft, completely alone on the far side of another world. During this flyby, the crew isn't just sightseeing. They're performing visual geological observations, validating navigation systems, and capturing imagery that helps confirm Orion's performance in deep space flight. It's a quiet phase of the mission, but one that mirrors the psychological and operational isolation future crews will face on even longer journeys. And once Orion emerges from behind the moon, Earth's gravity begins the slow pull that brings the mission home. The most dangerous moment of Artemis II doesn't happen on the way to the moon. It happens on the way back. After another 4 days traveling home, Orion approaches Earth at nearly 40,000 kilometers per hour, far faster than spacecraft returning from low Earth orbit. When Orion hits the atmosphere, friction compresses the air into plasma, driving temperatures on the heat shield up to about 2,760 degrees Celsius. That heat is absorbed by Orion's Avcoat heat shield, designed to slowly burn away and carry thermal energy with it. Artemis I proved that this system could survive re-entry, but it also revealed something unexpected. After the uncrewed mission, engineers found cracking and material loss in parts of the Avcoat layer. The investigation traced the issue to Orion's skip re-entry profile. Instead of staying continuously hot, the spacecraft briefly dipped into the atmosphere, climbed back out, and then re-entered again. That uneven heating caused gases to build up inside the heat shield, leading to cracks. Because of that discovery, NASA made a critical decision. Artemis II was delayed so engineers could redesign the re-entry profile, ensuring the heat shield chars more evenly and behaves predictably. Now comes the ultimate test. Artemis II will repeat a lunar speed re-entry, but this time with 4 humans on board. If Orion survives this phase, parachutes deploy, the capsule slows, and it splashes down in the Pacific Ocean. The data gathered here will determine whether Orion is truly ready for the missions that follow, because if humans are going to return to the moon and eventually go farther, this is the barrier they have to cross first. If everything works the way it's supposed to, Artemis II ends quietly. For NASA, the real work is just beginning, because Artemis II delivers something no simulation or ground test ever can: real human data from deep space. Engineers will analyze how Orion's life support systems performed over multiple days beyond Earth's protective magnetosphere, how much radiation the crew was exposed to, and how effective Orion's shielding proved to be, whether manual flight control and thrusters behaved exactly as expected when operated by humans far from Earth, and most critically, how the heat shield handled a redesigned lunar speed re-entry. Every sensor, every crew report, every thermal reading feeds directly into what comes next. That's why Artemis II is so important. It is the final gate. If this mission succeeds, NASA has proof that Orion, SLS, and human crews can safely travel to lunar distance and return. Without that proof, sending astronauts down to the moon's surface simply isn't an option. Artemis II carries a strange kind of pressure. It doesn't land on the moon. It doesn't build a base. It doesn't plant a flag. But it answers the last major unknown. Everything Artemis III depends on, crew survival, deep space operations, safe re-entry, is validated or questioned here. If Artemis II works, NASA moves forward. If it doesn't, the timeline to return humans to the lunar surface slips. Again. That's the tension at the heart of this mission. Artemis II doesn't land on the moon, but without it, no one does.